Before you watch this story, imagine the camera slowly zooming in on a face filled with emotion. What if I told you that the person who has everything, private jets, mansions, more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, would trade it all away for just one smile from a woman who doesn't even know his real name? What if the greatest battle this billionaire ever fought wasn't in boardrooms or stock markets, but in the humble corridors of a government hospital, trying to convince a brilliant doctor that his heart was worth more than his bank balance? This isn't just another rich boy meets poor girl story. This is about Arjun Mehra, who had the world at his feet but found his soul only when he lost everything. This is about Dr. Meera Sharma, who healed thousands of patients, but never realized her own heart was wounded until a lying, charming, infuriating man walked through her emergency room doors. By the end of this story, I promise you, you'll believe in love that transforms. You'll believe that the person you least expect might be the one who sees you most clearly. And if this story moves even a fraction of what it moved me, do one thing. Hit that like button so more people can discover this gem, and subscribe because stories this powerful deserve to be shared again and again. Now, let's begin where all great love stories do, in the moment everything changes forever. Arjun Mehra woke up on what should have been the greatest morning of his life with a familiar hollow ache in his chest. Through floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite at the Mehra Towers, Mumbai sprawled beneath him like a kingdom waiting for its king. And indeed, Arjun was royalty, just not the kind anyone truly envied. At 28, he was the sole heir to the Mehra Group, a conglomerate worth 47,000 crores. His face graced magazine covers as India's most eligible bachelor. His Instagram boasted 12 million followers who devoured photos of his exotic vacations, his vintage car collection, his parties that cost more than most people earned in decades. What they didn't see, what Arjun himself barely acknowledged, was the man who stared at his reflection each morning wondering if anyone would miss him if he simply disappeared. "Good morning, Arjun sir," his assistant Priya announced, entering with the precision of someone who'd worked for the Mehras for 15 years. "Your father has requested your presence at the board meeting. The Singapore deal." "Can wait," Arjun finished, not turning from the window. "What's my schedule?" Priya hesitated. This hesitation was new. In 15 years, she'd never hesitated. "Sir, your father was quite insistent. He mentioned that if you're not serious about the business, perhaps your cousin Vikram." Arjun laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let Vikram have it. Let him sit in those meetings where everyone nods and smiles and calculates how much they can steal while pretending to be loyal. Let him marry the heiress father's already selected. Let him. He stopped, surprised by his own vehemence. "Sir, clear my schedule, Priya. All of it. The whole week." "Sir, the board. The board can wait." "I can wait. For once in my goddamn life, I want to find out what I'm waiting for." That evening, Arjun did something he'd never done before. He walked out of his building through the front entrance instead of the private garage. He wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt, clothes from a store where nothing cost more than 2,000 rupees. He left his phone, his wallet, his platinum cards, his identity as Arjun Mehra, billionaire prince. In his pocket, he carried exactly 5,000 rupees in cash. His father's voice echoed in his head, "You're nothing without this name, boy. Nothing." Arjun intended to prove him wrong. Or perhaps, secretly, he intended to prove him right, so he could finally stop pretending. Dr. Meera Sharma had been awake for 36 hours when the ambulance brought in the motorcycle accident victim. At 34, she was the youngest senior resident in the emergency department of Lok Nayak Hospital, Delhi's busiest government medical facility. She was also, according to her colleagues, the most brilliant and the most exhausting person they knew. GCS 8, BP 9060, multiple rib fractures, suspected pneumothorax. The paramedic rattled off as they wheeled the patient in. Meera was already moving, her hands checking pulses, her eyes reading the monitor, her voice calm and commanding. "Chest tube kit. Someone call surgery. And get me a portable X-ray now, not in 5 minutes, now." She didn't notice the young man watching from the corridor. She never noticed spectators. In her 12 years of medical training, Mira had learned to filter out everything except what would save a life. The crying relatives, the hospital politics, her own aching feet and empty stomach, none of it existed when a patient needed her. The motorcycle victim survived. He would walk again, would hug his children again, because Mira had been there. It was 11 p.m. when she finally sat down in the doctor's lounge, her hands shaking slightly as she unwrapped the chapati and sabzi her mother had packed that morning. "Dr. Sharma, there's a man asking for you," a nurse called. "He says it's urgent." Mira wanted to say no. She wanted to finish her cold dinner, close her eyes for 10 minutes, remember what it felt like to be human. But urgent meant someone was suffering, so she stood, straightened her white coat, and walked out. The man in the corridor was not what she expected. Young, handsome in a way that made her immediately suspicious, good-looking men in government hospitals were usually pharmaceutical representatives or medical equipment salesmen, both of whom she despised. But this one looked lost. His expensive-looking clothes were rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands trembling slightly. "Are you a doctor?" he asked, and his voice cracked on the word. "Yes. What's the emergency?" He laughed, a broken sound. "I don't know. I think I might be the emergency. Is that possible? Can a person be their own emergency?" Mira's exhaustion made her blunt. "If you're having a psychiatric crisis, I can refer you to." No, I mean." He ran his hands through his hair, and she noticed the watch on his wrist. Patek Philippe. Her father had been a watch repairman before his arthritis ended his career. She knew what that watch cost. More than her annual salary. Possibly more than her decade of salaries. "You're in the wrong hospital," she said, her voice cooling. "Sir Ganga Ram is across the city. They have private rooms. Champagne with your Ford drip, if that's what you're looking for." His eyes widened, then something flickered recognition, or perhaps just surprise that she'd recognized his wealth. "I'm not looking for. I don't want." He stopped, took a breath. "My name is Arjun. And I have no idea why I'm here. I just walked and this was where I ended up. Can you just tell me if I'm dying? Because it feels like I am, but everyone keeps saying I'm fine." Mira should have walked away. She should have called security, had him removed, gone back to her dinner. Instead, something in his voice, the genuine confusion, the desperation beneath the polished surface, made her gesture to a bench. "Sit down, Arjun. Tell me what hurts." He told her everything. Or rather, he told her a version of everything that left out the crucial details. He spoke of feeling empty despite having everything. Of a father who saw him only as an extension of the family empire. Of a life so carefully constructed that he'd forgotten what was real and what was performance. "I walked out," he said. "Just left. I have 5,000 rupees and these clothes and that's it. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. I don't know what I'm going to eat tomorrow. And I've never felt more alive." Mira listened with the same focus she gave her patients. She heard the truth beneath the omissions, the wealth he was too ashamed to name, the privilege he couldn't quite acknowledge. But she also heard something else. A person genuinely searching. A soul in transition. "You need a psychiatrist," she said finally. "Not an emergency physician." "Probably." He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "But you're the first person who's looked at me like I'm real in a very long time. Even if you are looking at me like I'm a fascinating specimen of entitled wealthy man in crisis." Despite herself, Mira laughed. "That obvious? Dr. Sharma, you have the most expressive face I've ever seen. You should never play poker. Good thing I'm a doctor, not a gambler." She stood, checking her watch. "I have rounds. But..." She hesitated, then wrote something on her prescription pad. "This is the address of a shelter. Clean, safe, run by a friend of mine. Tell them Dr. Sharma sent you. They'll give you a bed, food, help you figure out next steps." He took the paper like it was sacred. "Why are you helping me?" Mira considered the question seriously. "Because 12 years ago, I was a terrified medical student who showed up at this hospital with nothing but determination and a scholarship I was terrified of losing. Someone helped me. That's how it works. That's how it should work. And if I want to see you again? To tell you how it goes. She should have said no. She absolutely should have said no. I'm here most days. Emergency department. But I warn you, I'm not interesting, and I'm certainly not available for whatever this is. For whatever this is, he repeated, standing. Dr. Sharma, I don't know what this is. But for the first time in years, I want to find out. Arjun didn't go to the shelter. Instead, he spent his first night of freedom on a park bench near the hospital, watching the building where Mira worked through the night. He wasn't stalking her, he told himself. He was orienting, finding his bearings in this new world. By morning, he learned several things. That chai from a street vendor cost 10 rupees and tasted better than anything from his father's imported coffee machine. That the men who slept on the pavement woke at 5 a.m. because the police would harass them otherwise. That a kind woman at a temple gave out free breakfast to anyone who waited in line, no questions asked. And that he was completely unprepared for poverty, despite his romantic notions. You're new, the woman at the temple observed, handing him a plate of poha. Your hands are soft. Your clothes are expensive. What happened? Midlife crisis, Arjun said, surprising himself with the honesty. I'm 28. The woman, he would later learn her name was Kamla, that she'd been feeding the hungry at this temple for 40 years, laughed until she cried. 28. Child, I'm 70. My midlife crisis was when my husband died and I had to raise 4 children alone. You're having a quarter-life crisis. Very fashionable these days. Is it? Arjun asked, genuinely curious. Oh yes. Rich young people, always searching. You know what I think. She leaned close, smelling of incense and turmeric. I think you're running from something. But you can't run from yourself. Eventually, you have to stop and face what you're really afraid of. Arjun thought of his father. Of the empire waiting for him. Of the life that would resume the moment he picked up a phone and called Priya. What if what I'm afraid of is that there's nothing to face? That I'm actually empty and all the money in the world can't fill it? Kamla patted his hand. Then you keep looking. But don't look in temples and park benches, child. Look in people's eyes. That's where you'll find what you need. He found Mira's eyes 12 hours later, when he appeared at the hospital again, unshaven, smelling of temple incense and street food, carrying a tiffin box Kamla had pressed into his hands. You didn't go to the shelter, she observed, not looking up from the chart she was reading. How do you know? You're wearing the same clothes. You have that look people get when they've been outside all night, part defiant, part proud, mostly exhausted. She finally met his gaze. Also, you smell like my grandmother's kitchen. Which is confusing. Arjun held out the tiffin. Peace offering. Temple food. Very holy, apparently. Against her will, Mira smiled. You can't bribe doctors with prasad, mister. Just Arjun. I'm trying to be just Arjun. Well, just Arjun, I have 12 patients waiting, a resident who called in sick, and a lecture I'm supposed to give in 2 hours that I haven't prepared for. I don't have time for whatever this is. Then don't make time. Just let me sit in your waiting area. Let me watch you work. I'm not asking for anything, Dr. Sharma. I don't know anyone else in this city. I don't know anyone else in the world who might understand. Mira should have refused. Every instinct honed by years of protecting herself, her time, her heart, every instinct said this man was trouble, was privileged, was playing at poverty the way rich people played at everything. But his eyes. In his eyes, she saw something she recognized. The same desperation she'd felt in her first year of medical school, certain she was failing, certain she didn't belong, certain that if she stopped moving for even a moment, everything would collapse. Fine. But you stay out of the way. And if anyone asks, you're my cousin from Pune. Visiting. Very boring. Very temporary. Your cousin, Arjun repeated, delighted. Does this cousin have a name? Rahul. Every family has a Rahul. She was already walking away, white coat flaring behind her. And Arjun? If you get in my way, I will have security remove you. Rich boy crisis or not. What followed was 3 weeks that would reshape everything Arjun believed about himself and the world. He learned to wake at 5 a.m. because Mira did. Her small apartment near the hospital, barely large enough for a bed and desk, but filled with books and plants and photographs of people who clearly loved her. He learned to make tea the way she liked it, strong, with ginger, no sugar, while she reviewed cases before her shift. He learned that government hospitals were battlefields. That doctors like Mira fought daily against impossible odds, too many patients, too few resources, bureaucratic indifference, and the crushing weight of knowing that for every life you saved, 3 more slipped through your fingers. "How do you do it?" he asked one night, walking her home after a 16-hour shift. A child had died that evening. 8 years old. Preventable, if the family had reached the hospital an hour earlier, if the ambulance hadn't been stuck in traffic, if. Mira didn't answer immediately. They were passing through a market closing for the night, vendors packing up unsold vegetables, the smell of jasmine from a flower seller's remaining stock. "Do you know why I became a doctor?" she finally asked. "To help people?" "That's the answer I give in interviews." She smiled, but it was sad. "The truth is, my father died when I was 12. Heart attack. We were in our village, hours from any hospital. By the time we got him to a doctor, he was gone. I became a doctor because I never wanted another child to feel what I felt. To wonder forever if things could have been different." Arjun thought of his own father. Alive, powerful, present in every way that mattered for business and no way that mattered for love. "My father would say that's illogical. That you're one doctor, that you can't save everyone, that systemic problems require systemic solutions. Your father sounds like a consultant. He's a businessman. Very successful. Very certain about everything. And you? Are you certain about anything?" Arjun stopped walking. They were at the entrance to her building now, the security guard nodding familiarly. Mira's cousin had become a known fixture. "I'm certain," he said slowly, "that I've learned more in 3 weeks with you than in 10 years of business school. I'm certain that I don't want to go back to my old life. And I'm certain that when I look at you, I see someone I want to become worthy of." Mira's breath caught. In the harsh light of the building entrance, she studied him, the expensive watch he'd finally stopped wearing, the calluses forming on his soft hands, the genuine confusion in his eyes about who he was becoming. "Arjun, you don't even know my favorite color. You don't know about my sister in America, or my mother's diabetes, or why I can't watch romantic movies without crying. You know my work, my exhaustion, my temper when I'm hungry. That's not enough to build, whatever you're suggesting. Then tell me. Let me learn." "I'm not asking for promises, Mira. I'm asking for the chance to keep showing up. To keep becoming someone who deserves to stand beside you." She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment, because surely this was temporary. Surely he would return to his world. Surely she was just an interesting chapter in his rich man's journey of self-discovery. But his eyes. In his eyes, she saw the same hope she felt blooming in her own chest, dangerous and tender. "Green," she said. "My favorite color is green. Like new leaves. Like possibility." And she turned and walked into her building, leaving him smiling in the darkness. The call came on a Tuesday. Arjun was helping Mira's mother, Sunita, with her physical therapy exercises, another role he'd somehow acquired, another way he'd embedded himself in Mira's life. His phone, silent for 3 weeks, suddenly blazed with light and sound. He ignored it. It rang again. And again. "Answer it," Sunita said, wise eyes watching him. "Might be important." "It's not. Nothing from that life is important anymore." But when it rang a 4th time, he looked at the screen. "Priya." And the message that followed, *, your father collapsed. Stroke. Critical. Come home, *. The world he'd escaped reached out and grabbed him by the throat. The private hospital in Mumbai was everything Lok Nayak was not. Hushed corridors, individual rooms larger than Mira's apartment, nurses who called him Mr. Mira, with deference he'd forgotten existed. His father lay unconscious, machines breathing for him, the empire he'd built suddenly leaderless. Vikram was there, of course. His cousin, smooth and smiling, already positioning himself as the natural successor. "Arjun, thank God. We were so worried." Where have you been? Your father was frantic before this happened. Getting a life, Arjun said shortly. What's the prognosis? The doctors are cautious. Even if he recovers, there may be impairments. The board meets tomorrow. We need to discuss leadership continuity. Tomorrow. Arjun laughed, harsh and humorless. My father might be dying and you're worried about the board meeting? I'm worried about 40,000 employees, Arjun. About shareholders, about your own ambition. Don't pretend otherwise, Vikram. I've known you since we were children. The argument might have escalated, but Priya appeared, her efficiency unchanged despite the crisis. Sir, your father is stable for now. I've arranged a suite for you at the hotel across the street. And she hesitated. There's a Dr. Sharma on the phone. She says it's personal. Arjun grabbed the phone like a lifeline. Mira. Arjun. Your mother's neighbor called me. She was worried when you left so suddenly. A pause. Are you okay? No. Yes. I don't know. He walked to the window, looking out at the city that had always felt like a cage. My father might die. The life I ran from is demanding I return. And all I can think about is that I didn't get to say goodbye to you properly. That I don't know when I'll see you again. Arjun, listen to me. Her voice was steady, the voice she used with frightened patience. You need to be there. For your father, yes, but also for yourself. Whatever your relationship, this is a chance to complete something. To find closure or reconciliation or whatever you need. And us. Another pause, longer this time. I'm not going anywhere. This hospital, these patients, this life, it's not glamorous, but it's mine. I'll be here when you figure out what you need to do. I already know what I need. I need you. Then come back. When you can, when you're ready, when you've faced whatever you're running from. I'll be here. She hung up before he could respond, leaving him staring at the phone, at the city, at the unconscious father who had never once said, I love you, without calculating what it would cost him. The board meeting was worse than Arjun expected. Vikram had spent 3 weeks well. He had allies, momentum, a narrative of Arjun as unstable, irresponsible, unfit to lead. The photographs were produced with theatrical regret. Arjun sleeping on park benches, Arjun in temple clothes, Arjun laughing with street vendors. Your behavior has been concerning, the chairman said. Particularly given your father's condition. The board needs stability, Arjun. Continuity. And you think Vikram provides that? I think Vikram has been present. Engaged. While you've been. The chairman spread his hands. Finding yourself, or whatever this was. Arjun thought of Mira. Of her 16-hour shifts, her tiffin box meals, her absolute conviction that her work mattered more than any recognition. He thought of Kamla at the temple, feeding strangers for 40 years. He thought of his own emptiness, finally beginning to fill with something real. I'll make you a deal, he said. Give me 6 months. Let me prove I can lead this company with the values I've discovered. If I fail, I'll step aside for Vikram. But if I succeed, I want something in return. Which is control. Not just of the company, but of the foundation. I want to redirect 20% of our profits to healthcare infrastructure. To the kind of hospitals where people actually get saved instead of just billed. Vikram laughed. He's gone mad. Spiritual crisis, clearly. The stress of his father's condition. Done, the chairman said, surprising everyone. 6 months, Arjun. Show us what you've learned. The 6 months that followed tested everything Arjun and Mira had begun to build. He threw himself into transforming the Mira group, not abandoning profit, but redefining purpose. He visited factories, met workers, learned names and stories. He established mobile medical units in rural areas, funded scholarships for medical students from underprivileged backgrounds, built a state-of-the-art trauma center in Delhi that would serve everyone regardless of ability to pay. And he called Mira every night. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for hours. He told her about his victories and failures, about his father's slow recovery, impaired but present, angry but proud in his own way. She told him about her patients, her research, her mother's improving health, her sister's pregnancy in America. But phone calls were not presents. Video chats were not touch. And slowly, inevitably, the distance began to erode what they'd built. There's a conference in Mumbai, Mira said one night, 6 weeks into the separation. International Emergency Medicine Symposium. I'm presenting a paper. Arjun's heart leaped. When? I'll clear everything. Arjun, I need to tell you something. Her voice was strange, distant. I've been offered a position. Johns Hopkins. Fellowship in Trauma Surgery. It would mean 3 years in Baltimore. Maybe longer. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. That's incredible, he finally managed. Mira, that's what you've always wanted. World-class training, research opportunities, the chance to leave. To leave everything I've built here. To leave my mother, my patients, this hospital that needs me. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. To leave you, though I'm not sure I ever really had you. We had 3 weeks, Arjun. 3 weeks of playing at normal life, and then you went back to yours, and I've been waiting to see if you'd ever really come back. I'm coming back. The 6 months. 6 months of phone calls. Of promises. Of a life that exists only when we're talking. She took a breath. I need to decide about Johns Hopkins by next week. And I need to know, Arjun. I need to know if there's really something here, or if I imagined it because I was lonely and you were charming and we both wanted to believe in something impossible. What do you want me to say? I want you to say something I can believe. Something that doesn't depend on your schedule, your father's health, your company's transformation. Something real. Arjun looked around his office, larger than Mira's apartment, filled with art and technology and everything money could buy. He thought of the park bench where he'd finally felt free. The temple where Kamla had fed him wisdom with his breakfast. The hospital corridor where a tired doctor had looked at him like he was real. I love you, he said. I've loved you since you told me I was having a quarter-life crisis. I love your exhaustion and your temper and your terrible taste in movies. I love that you save lives while I move money around and pretend it matters. I love that you see through me and choose to see something worth loving anyway. Arjun. I'm not finished. I can't promise you my life will ever be simple. I can't promise I won't fail at this transformation I'm attempting, that I won't wake up one day and find I've become my father despite everything. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. I will build a world where your work is valued, where your patients have what they need, where you never have to choose between your calling and your life. And if you go to Johns Hopkins, I will follow you. I'll open an office in Baltimore, learn American football, become the strange Indian billionaire who attends your conferences and brings you coffee at 3 a.m. Mira was crying now, he could hear it. You'd really do that? Give up everything you're building? Mira, don't you understand? You're what I'm building. Everything else is just architecture. You're the foundation. Without you, none of it matters. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady again, the doctor's voice, but warmer than he'd ever heard it. The conference is in 2 weeks. I'll see you then. And Arjun? I love you too. I think I have since you showed up at my hospital smelling like incense and desperation. The International Emergency Medicine Symposium was held at a 5-star hotel that Arjun had once frequented without noticing its luxury. Now, walking through the lobby in search of Mira, he saw everything: the marble floors polished by workers paid minimum wage, the floral arrangements costing more than monthly salaries, the careful performance of wealth that he'd once thought was simply normal. He found her at the registration desk, arguing with an organizer about something. Even frustrated, she was beautiful, her hair pulled back professionally, her white coat replaced by a blazer that somehow made her look more authoritative rather than less. She saw him mid-sentence, and her face transformed. The frustration vanished, replaced by something vulnerable and hopeful. Dr. Sharma, I believe you're in the wrong session, he said, approaching. The lecture on impossible love stories is down the hall. Is it now? And what are the qualifications of the lecturer? Personal experience, extensive research, and a willingness to learn from the world's leading expert on the subject. They stood there, surrounded by hundreds of medical professionals, the hum of conference activity all around them, and it was as if no one else existed. Arjun reached out, took her hand, felt her fingers intertwine with his. "I missed you," he said simply. "Show me." What followed was 3 days stolen from their separate lives. Arjun attended her presentation, brilliant, passionate, transforming emergency triage protocols she developed in Delhi's chaos into methodologies applicable worldwide. Mira sat in on his meetings with hospital administrators, watching him negotiate not for profit, but for access, for equity, for the radical notion that healthcare was a right rather than a commodity. On the final night, they walked on Marine Drive, the Queen's necklace glittering around them, the Arabian Sea breathing against the rocks below. "My father wants to meet you," Arjun said. "Properly, I mean. Not as the doctor who treated him during his recovery, though he's grateful for that, but as... As what? As the woman who changed his son. Who made me someone he finally recognizes as worthy of the name Mira." Arjun stopped, turned to face her. "He's not a good man, Mira. Not in the ways that matter to you. But he's trying." The stroke changed something in him. "He talks about legacy now, about meaning. And he knows, everyone knows, that I would trade everything for you." "Would you?" Mira asked. "Really?" "In a heartbeat. But I don't think I have to. I hope, we can build something that includes both our worlds. Your hospital and my foundation. Your patients and my resources. Your calling and my, whatever I am now." "You're a man who learned to care," Mira said softly. "That's not nothing, Arjun. That's everything." They kissed there, on Marine Drive, as the city glittered around them and the sea sang below. It was not their first kiss, that had been in her apartment, 2 weeks into their separation, when he'd surprised her with a visit and she'd cried with relief and fury and love. But it was the kiss that mattered, the one that sealed something between them, the promise of a shared future. Mira did not go to Johns Hopkins. It was the hardest decision she'd ever made, harder than medical school, harder than telling her father she was leaving their village for Delhi, harder than any diagnosis she'd ever delivered. She chose to stay because of what Arjun was building, the trauma center that would bear her father's name, the training program that would bring world-class education to doctors who couldn't afford American fellowships, the possibility of transforming Indian healthcare from within rather than escaping to where it was already better. "I might regret this," she told him, the night she made her decision. "I might wake up in 10 years and wonder what I gave up. Then we'll go," Arjun said immediately. "To Baltimore, to anywhere." "Mira, I meant what I said." "I know you did. That's why I'm staying." She took his face in her hands, this man who had arrived in her life as a mystery and become her certainty. "I'm staying because you're building something I believe in. Because together, we can do more than either of us could alone. And, because," she smiled, "someone has to keep you honest. Make sure you don't backslide into billionaire complacency." "Never," he promised. "As long as you're watching." The trauma center opened 18 months later. Arjun's father attended, walking with a cane but speaking clearly, his eyes wet as he saw his name alongside Mira's father's on the dedication plaque. The Mira Sharma Center for Emergency Medicine would serve over 50,000 patients annually, train hundreds of doctors, establish protocols that would be adopted across South Asia. At the opening, Arjun proposed. Not with spectacle, though he could have filled the stadium with roses, hired every musician in Mumbai, created a moment worthy of viral video. Instead, he proposed in the empty emergency bay at 3 a.m., after they'd both spent 20 hours ensuring the opening went perfectly, wearing scrubs and exhaustion and the absolute certainty of love tested and proven. "I don't have a ring," he said, kneeling on linoleum still smelling of antiseptic. "I have this." He held up his hospital ID badge, Arjun Mira, volunteer coordinator, the title he'd insisted on despite every objection. "I have every day of the rest of my life, spent trying to be worthy of you. I have the knowledge that whatever comes, sickness, health, wealth, poverty, the inevitable disasters that find their way to emergency rooms, we'll face it together. Mira Sharma, will you marry me? Will you let me spend my life proving that the best thing I ever did was walk into your hospital and lie about who I was?" She laughed, cried, pulled him to his feet. "You ridiculous man. You beautiful, ridiculous man. Yes. Yes to all of it. But I have conditions. Anything. We live in my apartment. Or something the same size. I won't lose myself in your world, Arjun. I won't become Mrs. Mehra, billionaire's wife, photographed at parties I don't care about. Done. My penthouse is already being converted to affordable housing. I signed the papers yesterday. And I keep working. Full time. No matter what children we have, what opportunities arise, what your family expects of the Mehra daughter-in-law. Mira, I would never. I know. But I need to say it. I need you to hear it. She took his hands. And you keep volunteering. Keep showing up. Keep remembering what you learned when you had nothing. Every day, he promised. For the rest of my life. Their wedding was a study in compromise. Arjun's mother wanted the society event of the decade, 5,000 guests, international celebrities, coverage in every publication. Mira wanted a temple ceremony with her family, her colleagues, the patients who had become her community. They ended up with 3 celebrations: the legal registration at the courthouse, witnessed by Kamla from the temple and Priya, who had finally retired to write her memoirs, the traditional ceremony in Mira's village, where Arjun was welcomed with suspicion until he spent 3 days helping rebuild the school roof, and finally, the reception at the trauma center, where 500 doctors, nurses, patients, and community members celebrated in the building that represented what they'd built. Together. You're the first Mehra to marry in a hospital, his father observed, not quite disapproving. I'm the first Mehra to marry for love, Arjun corrected gently. That seems more important. The first year of marriage tested their resolutions in ways neither anticipated. Arjun's transformation of the Mehra group accelerated, demanding travel, negotiation, the constant resistance of those who preferred profit to purpose. Mira's responsibilities expanded as the trauma center became a model for national reform, her expertise sought by policymakers and international organizations. They fought. About time, about priorities, about the thousand small negotiations of shared life. Mira hated Arjun's late nights, the phone calls at dinner, the assumption that his work was urgent while hers was merely important. Arjun struggled with Mira's emotional absence after difficult cases, her refusal to let him solve problems that money could address, her insistence on independence that sometimes felt like exclusion. I don't need you to fix things, she shouted once, after he'd arranged a private air ambulance for a critical patient without consulting her. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. That this system, imperfect as it is my system. My choice. And I need you to let me help, he shouted back. To not reject everything I offer because it comes with money attached. I'm not apologizing for what I have, Mira. I'm trying to use it well. They didn't speak for 2 days. Then Mira came home to find Arjun in their small kitchen, deliberately small, deliberately normal, attempting to make dal exactly the way her mother did. The kitchen was destroyed. The dal was inedible. He was watching a YouTube tutorial with the concentration he usually reserved for billion-dollar negotiations. What is this? Research, he said, not looking up. I'm trying to understand. Your mother cooks when she's upset. Your colleagues share meals after difficult shifts. Food it's connection for you. Community. I keep trying to buy solutions when you need presents. So I'm learning to be present. Starting with dal. Mira laughed despite herself. That's not dal. I don't know what that is. I know. But I'm going to keep trying until I get it right. Just like I'm going to keep trying with us. If you'll let me. She sat beside him, took the wooden spoon from his hand, showed him the proper technique. Together, she said. That's the only way this works. Together. The crisis came in their 2nd year of marriage, though it had been building long before. A pharmaceutical company, one the Mehra Group had invested in before Arjun's transformation, was found to have falsified clinical trial data for a new antibiotic. The drug had been approved, distributed, prescribed to thousands of patients. Dozens had died. Hundreds more suffered serious complications. The scandal threatened everything. Lawsuits, criminal charges, the collapse of trust Arjun had spent years building. Vikram, still waiting, still ambitious, saw his opportunity. Step down, he urged the board. Let Arjun take responsibility. Preserve the company. Arjun was prepared to do exactly that. To resign, to face prosecution if necessary, to accept that his attempt at ethical business had failed. But Mira stopped him. "You're not responsible for what happened before you took control," she said, reviewing documents with the same intensity she brought to differential diagnoses. "But you are responsible for what happens now. For the patients. For justice." "What are you suggesting?" "Full disclosure. Every document, every email, every person who knew and didn't act. You expose it all, support prosecution of everyone responsible, establish a compensation fund for victims." She met his eyes. "It will cost hundreds of crores. It might destroy the company. It will certainly destroy your reputation as the reformed billionaire, the ethical businessman. And if I don't? If I let Vikram handle it, minimize damage, protect the bottom line, then you become your father. The man you ran from. The man who calculated human cost against profit and found profit more compelling." She took his hand. "I won't leave you, Arjun. Whatever you choose. But I won't recognize you either. Not the you I've loved. Not the you've become." He chose exposure. Chose justice. Chose, in the end, Mira's version of him over safety. The fallout was catastrophic. The Mira Group's stock collapsed. Vikram led a shareholder revolt, seizing control of the traditional business lines. Arjun was left with the foundation, the trauma center, a handful of ethical investments, and debts that would take decades to clear. They moved to a smaller apartment. He began teaching business ethics at a local college, consulting for nonprofits, rebuilding slowly and deliberately. She increased her clinical hours, took on administrative responsibilities that paid better, supported them through the transition without once suggesting she'd been right to doubt. "I was right to doubt," she said once, when he thanked her for staying. "Not about your character. About whether the world would let you be good. It doesn't, Arjun. It rewards the Vikrams, punishes the idealists. But you chose anyway. That's what matters. That's what I love." 5 years after the scandal, Arjun received a call from an unexpected source. The new government, elected on a platform of anti-corruption and social welfare, wanted him to lead a commission on healthcare reform. Not despite his history, the minister explained, but because of it. "You know where the bodies are buried," she said bluntly. "You know how money corrupts, how systems fail, what real reform requires. And you've proven you'll sacrifice everything for what's right. That's rare, Mr. Mehra. We need it." The commission's work would take 3 years, require him to travel constantly, pay virtually nothing. He discussed it with Mira for exactly 10 minutes before she said yes. "You're asking permission you don't need," she observed. "What's really going on?" "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of failing again. Of being used, corrupted, becoming what I fought against. Afraid of leaving you again, just when we've finally found balance." "Arjun." She took his face in her hands, the gesture that had become their shorthand for serious conversation. "You've been preparing for this your whole life. The rich boy who learned poverty, the businessman who learned ethics, the husband who learned partnership. This is what all of it was for. And I'll be here. Always. Not waiting, not sacrificing, living my own life, doing my own work, meeting you at the end of each day to share what we've built separately." The commission transformed Indian healthcare. Not completely, not perfectly, real change never is. But Arjun's recommendations, backed by Mira's clinical expertise and the credibility they'd earned together, became policy. Universal emergency care. Price controls on essential medications. Doctor training programs in underserved regions. The Mehra Sharma Center became a model replicated across 20 states. Vikram's Mehra Group, meanwhile, stagnated. Without Arjun's vision, without the ethical investments that had attracted international partners, it became just another conglomerate, profitable but unremarkable. When Vikram finally reached out, offering to sell back the traditional businesses at a fraction of their value, Arjun declined. "I have what I need," he told his cousin. "What I want. Build your own legacy, Vikram. Stop trying to steal mine." They had children late, deliberately, after the commission's work was complete and they'd proven they could sustain partnership through pressure. Twins, a boy and girl, born in the trauma center where their parents had met, delivered by colleagues who had become family, welcomed by a community that had watched their love story unfold. They named them Raj and Ananya. Raj for Mira's father, the watch repairman whose death had set her on her path. Ananya for Arjun's grandmother, the only Mira who had ever shown him unconditional love. Parenting tested them differently than any professional challenge. Arjun struggled with the instinct to protect through provision, private schools, security details, the gilded cage he'd escaped. Mira fought her own battles, the fear that motherhood would consume her identity, that she would repeat her own mother's sacrifices, that she couldn't be both doctor and mother and wife and self. They found their way through the same method that had built their marriage: conversation, compromise, the willingness to be wrong and to say so. "I want them to know struggle," Arjun said, watching 3-year-old Raj throw a tantrum over a broken toy. "Real struggle. Not the performance I put on, but actual uncertainty, actual need. Then we stay in this apartment. We send them to the school down the street. We teach them that their name means responsibility, not entitlement." Mira picked up Ananya, who had wandered over seeking comfort. "And we teach them about their grandparents. Your father's ambition, my father's death, all the ways love and loss shaped us. Will they understand? Eventually. When they're ready." She smiled at him, this man who had arrived in her emergency room with nothing but desperation and hope. "Just like we eventually understood our own parents. Just like we're still understanding each other." 20 years after they met, Arjun and Mira returned to Lok Nayak Hospital. Not for work, though they still consulted, still taught, still showed up when needed, but for the opening of a new wing. The Arjun-Mira wing for emergency psychiatry, addressing the mental health crisis that had been invisible when they were young. The hospital had changed. New equipment, expanded facilities, the inevitable commercialization of healthcare. But the essential remained: the crowds of suffering people, the overworked staff, the desperate hope that someone would help. They walked the corridors where they'd first talked, where Mira had saved lives and Arjun had learned to see. The bench where they'd sat during her breaks was still there, though repainted, surrounded by new construction. "I was so tired that night," Mira remembered. "So certain you were just another rich tourist slumming for entertainment. I only talked to you because I couldn't bear to be cruel to someone who seemed genuinely lost. And I was lost. More than I knew." Arjun took her hand, the gesture automatic after decades together. "I was looking for escape, and I found purpose. Looking for distraction, and I found love. Looking for myself, and I found you. Sentimental old man. Sentimental old woman." They laughed together, as they still did, as they had through every challenge and change. The laughter attracted attention. A young doctor, exhausted and curious, approached with the same suspicion Mira had once shown. "Dr. Sharma? Mr. Mehra? I'm Dr. Patel. I'm supposed to give you the tour, but—" She hesitated, then honesty overcame professionalism. "Can I ask you something? How do you do it? Maintain this, whatever you have, with everything else you do." Mira looked at Arjun, the silent communication of long partnership. "What do you think she's asking?" she asked him. "How to have it all," Arjun suggested. "Career, love, meaning, balance. The impossible equation." Or, Mira added, "how to accept that you can't have it all and choose what matters most." Dr. Patel looked between them confused. "Which is it?" "Both," they said together, then laughed again. "Choose what matters," Mira elaborated. "And keep choosing it every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The choosing is the relationship. The commitment to keep showing up, keep growing, keep surprising each other. And accept help," Arjun added. "The hardest lesson for me. That love isn't self-sufficient, that partnership means vulnerability, that needing someone isn't weakness." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "My boyfriend, he's in finance. Very successful. We fight about time, about priorities. I think he's selfish. He thinks I'm unrealistic." "Maybe you're both right," Mira said gently. "And maybe, if you keep talking, you'll find the way through. We nearly didn't, more than once. The talking saved us. The willingness to be wrong, to change, to see the other person's perspective as valid even when it hurts. Is that the secret then? Communication. Arjun shook his head. There's no secret. No formula. Just keep trying. Keep loving. Keep believing that the person you chose is worth the effort and that you are worth theirs. The twins grew into adults who combined their parents' best qualities, Raj with his father's strategic vision and his mother's clinical precision, becoming a public health researcher. Ananya with her mother's emotional intelligence and her father's persuasive charm, leading a non-profit for healthcare access in rural areas. Arjun's father died in his 80s, finally proud of the son who had exceeded his understanding. Their final conversation, Arjun shared only with Mira. He said he wished he'd learned earlier what I learned. That love is the only investment that compounds forever. That everything else rusts, depreciates, becomes obsolete. Arjun's voice had been steady, but his eyes were wet. I told him I learned it from watching his failures. That his mistakes taught me what not to become. He laughed. Actually laughed. Said that was the most valuable thing he ever gave me. Mira's mother lived longer, finally succumbing to the diabetes she'd managed for 30 years, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the matriarch of a family that had grown far beyond her village origins. Her final words to Mira, "You chose well. Not the money, the man. Remember the difference." They remembered. Through every anniversary, every challenge, every ordinary Tuesday that was indistinguishable from the next except for the fact of being together. They remembered in the work they continued, the lives they touched, the example they set for everyone who knew their story. Arjun was 73 when the diagnosis came. Parkinson's early stage, manageable for now but inevitably progressive. He told Mira in their kitchen, the same small kitchen where he'd learned to make dal, now filled with grandchildren's art and decades of accumulated memory. "I've been thinking about endings," he said, his hand steady though it would not remain so. "About what I want the last chapter to look like. Arjun, hear me out. I've had the great fortune of a life I never expected. Love I didn't deserve. Purpose I stumbled into. And I want the end to be as intentional as the middle." He took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth, the strength that had never wavered. "I want to die at home. Not in a hospital, not surrounded by machines. Here with you, with our family, with the memories we've built." Mira, the doctor who had fought death professionally for 50 years, nodded slowly. "I can arrange that. Hospice, pain management, everything you need. I know you can. That's not what I'm asking." He paused, gathering courage for the question that had haunted him since the diagnosis. "I'm asking if you'll be there. Not as my doctor, not as my caregiver, but as my wife. The woman who saw me when I was invisible, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I need to know you'll let me go when it's time. That you won't fight for one more day, one more treatment, one more desperate hope. That you'll let me have the ending I choose." Mira's tears came then, the tears she rarely showed, the vulnerability she reserved for him alone. "How can you ask that? How can you ask me to? Because you've always been the strong one. The one who knew what was needed and did it, regardless of cost. And this is what I need, my love. Your strength, one final time. To let me go with grace, with dignity, with the knowledge that our story was complete." She held him that night, as she had held him through every crisis of their long partnership. And slowly, painfully, she found the strength to promise what he asked. The years that followed were their gift to each other. Arjun's decline was gradual enough to allow adjustment, to create space for the conversations that needed to happen, the gratitude that needed expression, the love that needed reaffirmation. They traveled when they could to the village where Mira grew up, now transformed by the development their work had enabled, to the temple where Kamla had once fed a desperate young man, her successor still feeding the hungry, to the park bench where Arjun had spent his first night of freedom, now marked with a small plaque commemorating the beginning of a love story. They worked as long as possible, Mira consulting on emergency medicine policy, Arjun writing his memoirs, their collaboration continuing even as his hands grew less steady, his voice softer. The book, published 2 years before his death, was titled Rich in Love, A Billionaire's Education. It became a bestseller not for the wealth it described, but for the transformation it documented, the The proof that change was possible, that love could redeem even the most privileged blindness. And finally, when the time came, Mira kept her promise. She sat with him in their bedroom, morning light streaming through windows they'd chosen together decades before, holding his hand as his breathing slowed. Their children and grandchildren waited nearby, respecting the privacy of this final intimacy between husband and wife. "I see him," Arjun whispered, his eyes focused on something beyond the room. "My father. He's young, Mira. The age when I ran from him. He's smiling." "Go to him," Mira said, her doctor's knowledge accepting what her heart resisted. "Go knowing you became everything he couldn't. Everything I needed. Everything you hoped to be. Wait for me," he breathed. "However long it takes. Wait for me. I will. I am. I always have been." He died as he had lived, with intention, with love, with the absolute certainty that his life had mattered because of her. Mira lived another 7 years. Not as long as she'd hoped, longer than she'd feared. She spent them deliberately, continuing the work that had defined her, writing her own memoirs, watching her grandchildren become adults who carried forward the values she and Arjun had embodied. She never remarried, never sought to replace what could not be replaced. But she built community, deep and sustaining, the colleagues who became family, the patients whose lives she touched, the causes she championed with the energy of someone who knew time was finite. On her final day, she asked to be taken to Lok Nayak Hospital. Not to the trauma center that bore her name, that was Arjun's gift, his legacy, but to the original emergency department, now modernized beyond recognition, but still serving the same desperate, hopeful crowds. She sat in a wheelchair in the corridor where they'd first talked, where a young doctor had looked at a lost rich boy with suspicion and seen something worth saving. The current staff knew who she was, gave her space, honored her presence with quiet respect. "I kept my promise," she told the empty air, or perhaps to Arjun, or perhaps to herself. "I waited. And now I'm coming." Her heart stopped in that corridor, in that hospital, in the place where everything had begun. The staff tried to resuscitate her automatic response, professional instinct, then stopped when they found her advanced directive, her explicit instructions, her absolute clarity about what she wanted. She was buried beside Arjun, in a simple cemetery near the village where she'd grown up. The headstone bore both their names, their dates, and the inscription they'd chosen together decades before, "Rich in love. Finally home. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. I know it was longer than most videos, longer than the algorithms prefer. But some stories need space. Some transformations can't be rushed. Here's what I want you to take from Arjun and Mira's story. That change is possible. No matter where you start, privilege or poverty, certainty or confusion, you can become someone new. The person you are today is not the person you have to be tomorrow. Arjun proved that. Mira proved that. The life they built together proved that. That love is work. Not the romantic comedy version, where everything resolves in 90 minutes. Real love, the kind that lasts, that transforms, that matters, is daily choice, daily effort, daily recommitment. Mira and Arjun fought, failed, recovered, grew. Their love was strong not because it was easy but because they refused to abandon it when it was hard. That we need each other. Arjun's wealth meant nothing until he met someone who saw through it. Mira's competence meant nothing until she let someone in. We are not meant to be self-sufficient islands. The strongest people are those who know when to need, when to accept help, when to admit that alone we are incomplete. That legacy matters. Not the legacy of wealth or fame, but the legacy of lives touched, of love given, of the world made slightly better for our presence. Arjun and Mira could have lived comfortable, unremarkable lives. Instead, they chose to matter. To build something that outlasted them. To be rich in the only currency that truly counts. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in possibility, in love, in the power of transformation, then I've done what I set out to do. Hit that like button so this reaches others who need it. Subscribe for more stories that matter, more explorations of films and lives that inspire. And in your own life, remember, you are not finished. Your story is still being written. Choose love. Choose growth. Choose to be rich in what matters. Until next time, keep watching. Keep believing. Keep becoming.